A girl was accused of bringing drugs through the airport just because she didn't seem to fit in business class. The airport workers pushed her too far until she had to call her dad. What they didn't know was that her dad was George Clooney. Before we start, please like and follow 4 more stories like this one. Now, let's get into it. Is that your ticket, sweetie? Or did you borrow it from someone who can actually afford business class? The voice was slow and rude, like the woman had said it many times before. The woman, whose name tag read Tina, looked Maira up and down with a mean smile. Maira gave her the ticket and her ID, staying calm. She had been through worse, but this felt new. Tina didn't just doubt her. She seemed to find it funny. Tina then leaned in, looking closely at the ID. "Oh, look at that," she laughed. "Maira Clooney, huh?" Maira just nodded. "Let me guess, you're going to some kind of acting thing," Tina said, making it sound like a joke. "An acting camp," Maira said calmly, "in Chicago." Tina snorted. "And your daddy signed you up?" "What? You think he's George Clooney or something?" "He is," Maira said, not even blinking. That's when Tina started laughing, a loud, ugly sound. People in line turned to see. "Oh, honey, please," she said, still giggling. "You really think I'll believe that? You can't just put the name Clooney on an ID and act like a celebrity's kid." Maira didn't say anything. Her face was still, but her hands were tightening into fists behind the counter. Tina's voice got lower and meaner. "You know what I think? I think you stole that ticket. Or maybe you're running some kind of trick. Or worse," she tilted her head. "You've got something in that bag. You're acting all quiet and polite, and it's making me nervous. You could be hiding something." "What?" "No," Maira started, confused. But Tina cut her off. She leaned in, acting like she was checking the ID again, but with her other hand, she secretly pushed a button under the desk. "I've seen your type," Tina said, loud enough for others to hear. "Smart little girls who think they can lie there." Way past security, Maira saw 2 security men walking toward her. She looked back at Tina. "This is a mistake. I'm not lying. I can show you the email, the ticket." "Let the officers handle it, sweetie," Tina said, stepping back as if she were suddenly afraid. "I don't deal with drug runners." "Drug what? Right. Are you talking about?" Maira's voice shook, more from shock than fear. "I'm 17. I'm just ma'am. Step away from the counter," one of the guards yelled. They moved in quickly, without any calm words. One grabbed her backpack, and the other grabbed her arm. "Wait, I can explain," Maira said, but the first guard pulled her bag away, throwing it on a table. The second one grabbed her arm, pulling her back so hard she almost fell. "I haven't done anything wrong. You'll get your chance to explain," the taller guard said, opening her backpack without care. "Right now, we're checking for illegal items." People were now watching, and some were taking out their phones. Someone whispered, "What's going on?" But no one helped. Inside her bag, they pulled everything out: her notebook, her script pages, her small shampoo bottles. Her clothes were pulled out and dropped like a dirty towel. One agent held up a rolled-up wrist wrap and smelled it. "TSA flagged her earlier," Tina said proudly from behind the counter. "She got through, but I had a bad feeling." Maira was quiet now. Her face was hot, but she refused to cry. The agent opened a side pocket and dumped out her protein bars and some coins. Then he turned to her. "You're going to tell us what this is," he said, holding up a small bottle of liquid. It was her spray for sore muscles. "That's sports spray," Maira said quietly, "for soreness." He didn't look convinced. "You might need to test that." She stared at him. "I'm not bringing in anything illegal. I'm not a criminal. Dad, he'll be. Here, he'll explain." Yeah, the shorter guard said, not looking at her. "And I'm Brad Pitt." The joke wasn't funny, but Tina laughed again. They didn't listen. They never gave her a chance. Maira stood there, her heart racing, breathing fast. Surrounded by people who saw her as a bad person, not a teenager trying to catch a flight. They treated her like she was dangerous, all because she wore a hoodie, had a name they didn't believe, and stayed quiet when she could have yelled. Just before things got really bad, her phone had buzzed. She had stepped away to answer it with a small smile. "Hey, Dad." George Clooney's voice was soft and familiar. "You sure you don't want me?" "To come with you, pumpkin. I could get on the next flight." Maira laughed softly. "Dad, if you show up at the airport, you know what will happen? I'll never get through. You attract reporters." He paused, knowing she was right. "Still, I don't like you flying by yourself." "I'm fine," she said. "I need to do this alone. Trust me." There was another, longer pause. "All right," George finally said. "But you call me the second you land." "I mean it. I will," she promised. "Love you. Love you more." She hung up and put the phone away. But now, just a few minutes later, she wished she had let him come. Her bag was wide open and everything had been dumped out. Her folded shirts, her sweatpants, a bag with her bathroom items, and her script pages. Then, as if to make things even more embarrassing, out came a soft bra, followed by 2 pairs of underwear. They landed quietly on the floor. Maira couldn't breathe. She blinked and dropped to her knees, her hands shaking as she tried to pick them up before anyone could. See? Her heart was beating in her throat, and she felt her neck get hot with shame. 1 pair had landed near a man who looked down and then quickly looked away. Maira grabbed them and hid them in her jacket pocket. She didn't look at anyone. Her fingers were still shaking. "Backpack too," said the second guard. "I'll open it," she said, reaching to hand it to him, but he grabbed it from her shoulder so roughly that it pulled her with it. "Please, just be careful," she said, trying to stop him, but he pulled the zippers down hard. Everything fell out: her journal, pens, protein bars, and at the very bottom, a small ceramic mug she had packed carefully. It rolled once and then hit the tile floor. There was a soft crack, and then it broke into pieces that scattered around her feet. Maira stared. Then her knees buckled, and she dropped down, her hands open as if she could catch what was already broken. "No, no, no, please. This is a gift from my late father," she said, her voice small. "Geez, it's just a mug," one of the guards muttered. She didn't move. Her hands rested near the pieces. Then another voice, full of poison, spoke up. "Well, that's weird," Tina said, leaning against the wall with her arms crossed. "Didn't you say your dad is George Clooney?" Maira didn't answer. "So which one is it, sweetie?" Tina asked, walking closer. "Is your real dad a movie star, or some dead guy with a broken coffee mug?" Maira didn't say anything. "It's kind of a confusing story, isn't it?" Tina sneered. Something inside Maira snapped. She stood up, breathing fast, her eyes like ice. Hands were tight fists. Before the first officer knew what was happening, she shoved him hard. He stumbled back, surprised. The second officer lunged for her, but she twisted away, sending him off balance and into a pile of plastic bins. People gasped and someone screamed. A third, bigger man grabbed her arm, and she struggled, trying to hit his side with her elbow. A fourth guard came from behind and wrapped his arms around her waist, holding her back. She kicked and fought, but they had her. 4 grown men holding down one 17-year-old girl. Her arms were pulled behind her back as she screamed without words, angry and desperate. Then a calm, deep voice cut through the noise. Enough. The guards froze. The sound of hard shoes clicked on the floor. A man in a gray blazer walked up. His eyes scanned the mess, the bins, the clothes, the broken cup, and the girl on the floor. Behind him stood a line of other guards. "My name is Charles," the man said. "I'm the terminal supervisor." The officers tried to explain, one saying there was an alert, another saying she got violent. She was pushed, someone else whispered. Charles raised a hand. "Silence." He looked at Maira. "Can you stand?" Her breath shook, and she didn't answer. "I said," he repeated, his voice firmer. "Let her go." Hands let go, and Maira slowly got up. Her jacket was half off, her shirt was wet with sweat, and there was a little blood on her hand. She didn't speak or cry, just stared. Charles looked at her, then down at the biggest piece of the broken mug. He knelt and picked it up. He looked at her and said, "Let's talk somewhere quiet." Maira nodded and stepped over the mess, with one shoe missing and nothing left in her bag that wasn't broken. Maira thought the worst was over, but she was wrong. "Miss Clooney," Charles said, leading her to a service counter. "We have a problem with your ticket. Some things don't add up." "I already went through security," she said. "I checked in hours ago." "Yes, and now I'm checking if you're even allowed." "On this flight," he said. "Business class, right? 17 years old, flying alone." He tapped on a tablet. "We think this ticket was bought with a stolen card." "It wasn't," Maira said. "I need to see the credit card, your ID, and the email showing you bought the ticket." She opened her phone to show him the email from her dad. "My dad booked it. George Clooney. I have the proof." Charles looked up and laughed a little. "Of course," he muttered. "Why not?" He showed her the screen where the name on the card was. "Blacked out for security. You see, we can't check anything with this. I can text him. He's on his way. He'll be here any minute." Charles sighed like he'd heard it all before. "And let me guess," he said with a mean tone. "He's not only George Clooney, but he's coming. In a big black car with bodyguards, right?" Maira blinked. She could feel what he was thinking. "You're lying. You don't belong here." "I'm telling the truth," she said softly. He ignored her. A staff member whispered something to him. "I'm sorry," he said. But he didn't sound sorry at all. "Until we can check the payment, you can't board." "You're canceling my ticket?" She stared at him. He nodded. "It's on hold. We have the right to do that if we think something is wrong." "I didn't do anything wrong. I didn't steal anything. This is my name." "My father, I'm not going to argue," Charles said. "If the person who paid for the ticket wants to come talk to us, we'll think about it. Until then, please step aside." She didn't move. Charles nodded to the two agents standing nearby. "Take her out of the boarding area." "No, wait," she said, her breath catching. You can call whoever you need from the public area," he said. The words felt like knives. She stood still as an agent gently pushed her toward the hallway. "Let's go, miss." She didn't fight back. She walked between them, silent, every step loud on the floor. People turned to watch. When they got to the glass doors near the exit, Maira stopped. Her phone buzzed. She pulled it out. Dad was calling. She answered, "Dad." George's voice was clear and worried. "Maira, what's going on?" They took my ticket," she whispered, her voice breaking. "They said it was fake. They didn't believe me. They said you had to come fix it." There was silence. Then, "Where are you?" "They're taking me to baggage claim." "Stay right where you are," he said, his voice firm. "Don't move. I'll be there in 10 minutes. "Okay," she nodded, even though he couldn't see. "I mean it, baby." "Girl, don't move." The call ended. She stared through the glass at the people outside. She turned her back to the agents, leaned against a metal railing, and slid down to the floor. She pulled her knees to her chest and didn't care who watched anymore. She stayed there until she heard firm, heavy footsteps. A hush fell over the area. Maira looked up. There he was, Gosh, George Clooney. Not in a movie, but right here. He wore a gray jacket, dark jeans, and nice shoes. His presence was louder than anything. In the room, he walked up to her and offered a hand. "You okay?" She nodded, her eyes filling with tears. She took his hand. Then he turned to the agents, and his voice was cold as steel. "Someone better start doing that now." George stood still, his eyes fixed on the man walking toward him. It was Charles, the supervisor, who now looked very small. He looked like a man who knew he'd made a huge mistake. His face was pale, and his hand was shaking as he held it out to George. "Mr. Clooney, sir, I can't tell you how sorry I am." George didn't take his hand. He just looked at it, then back at Charles's face. "You're the one who pulled her ticket." "Yes, sir." Charles swallowed. "I got an alert and I acted on it, but I should have looked closer." "Policy?" George asked quietly. "Was humiliating a 17-year-old girl policy?" "Sir, no, of course not." Charles's voice shook. "I didn't realize she was your—" George took one step forward and Charles stepped back. "She told you who she was," George said, his voice cutting through the noise. "She showed you her ID, her ticket, her name. All you saw was someone you thought didn't belong in business class." "I admit, I made terrible assumptions," Charles whispered. "I'm going to make sure this never happens again. I've already told my team to put her back on the flight, sir. We'll even upgrade her. I'll talk to all the staff." George didn't blink. "Is her name on the ticket?" "Yes, sir. Absolutely." "Who paid for it?" "Your name, sir. It's on the record." We didn't check it right." George's eyes got a little narrower. "You didn't fail to check. You failed to respect her." Charles nodded quickly. "You're right. That's on me. All of it. I've already told my bosses. I'll take full responsibility." "Is that before or after the videos get posted online?" George asked quietly, looking around at the people filming with their phones. Charles turned even paler. "We'll handle it. We'll put out a statement. We'll clear her name." George raised an eyebrow. "I'm not here for statements. Mr. Clooney, please," Charles pleaded. "If there's anything else I can do, I'll do it. I'll personally walk your daughter to the gate. I'll do whatever you need." George glanced back at Maira, who was watching everything. Just then, another man walked up. He wasn't big like George, but everyone made room for him. His name tag said he was Sir Henson, the regional director. He came straight to George. "Mr. Clooney, I'm terribly sorry about what's happened here today." George was quiet. "We've looked at what happened," Sir Henson said. "There were mistakes made all around. In judgment, in how we do things, and most of all, in basic kindness." George nodded slowly. "You're not wrong. I appreciate you not walking out." George's voice was low. "We don't want attention. We just wanted to get on the plane." "I understand," Henson said. "I've already approved your daughter's ticket. Same seat. She'll also get priority treatment for the rest of the day. No more trouble." George looked at Maira. She was still standing quietly, with her hands in her hoodie sleeves. "She'll be taken to the plane through a private lane," Henson went on. "And I'll walk you both to the terminal entrance." George nodded again. "That'll work." The other airport workers stood far away, not saying a word. "Your people need to remember something," George said, his voice calm but sharp. Henson waited. "My daughter wasn't asking for special treatment. She had a valid ticket. What she got was doubt, teasing, and treated in a way no one should be." "You're absolutely right," Henson replied. "And it's our job to make sure it never happens again. There will be new training and people will be held responsible." George didn't nod this time. He just looked at the man, letting the silence say it all. Then he turned to Maira. She had been holding herself together for 2 hours. She looked up at him, Ready to go? He asked. She nodded, but without much energy. Yeah. Henson showed them to a special lane for priority passengers. The crowd watched. As they moved, Maira walked just behind her dad, holding the torn strap of her backpack. She looked straight ahead, past the guards who now greeted her with nervous nods. She was back in control, but just barely. Inside the final security area, George turned to her. You did good. She gave a small smile that quickly faded. It still feels bad, she said. I know it's over, but ... I let it get to me, she said. I lost control back there. You didn't lose it, George said. You were pushed. But I shouldn't have let them see how much it hurt. George looked her in the eyes. That's not weakness, Maira. That's being human. The ones who should be ashamed are the people who think they can push others around. Her shoulders relaxed a little. They walked not just as a famous person and his daughter, but as a father and daughter. The boarding door was still open when George looked at Maira and said, I'm coming with you. She was surprised. You don't have to. I can go alone. After. Today, George said, you're not getting on that plane without me. His voice left no room to argue. He wasn't mad. He just couldn't let her fly off alone with her hands still shaking. He spoke quietly to the gate agent, and a seat was found. They got on the plane quietly. Most people were already in their seats. A few people looked over, some with their phones out, but George ignored them. He put his bag away, helped Maira with hers, and sat down. Maira sat by the window, her arms crossed tightly. She didn't cry or talk. She just stared out the window. On her lap was a small white towel. Inside were the broken pieces of the mug. She hadn't let it go. You going to hold on to those the whole flight? George asked. She didn't look at him. Yeah, let me see your hands, he said gently. I'm fine. Let me see. She slowly opened her hands. The cuts weren't deep, but there were thin red lines across her palm. One was still bleeding a little. George took out a clean handkerchief and started cleaning the blood, soft and slow. She watched him, her eyes burning. They didn't care, she whispered. They just threw it. He kept wiping, his touch calm. When he was done, he held her hand. You know, he said, you remind me so much of him. She looked over, confused. Your dad. She swallowed. He was quiet, George said, his voice low. Always thinking. He wouldn't speak unless he had something important to say. But when he talked, people listened. He was stubborn, too. Just like you. He had that fire inside him, but he used it too. Stand up for other people. Maira was silent. There was this fire, George went on, a few years before you were born. A building was burning down. The fire trucks were late. People were screaming from the windows, and your dad, he just ran. In, her eyes grew wide. He didn't wait. He just heard there were people inside and went into the smoke. He got 4 people out. A mom and her baby and 2 older men who couldn't walk. Maira covered her mouth. But by the time he went back for the 5th, George said quietly, the roof fell in. Maira closed her eyes tight. He didn't make it, George said, his face calm. But those people did, and that's the man who raised you. That's the blood you carry. The silence between them was full of emotion. Maira looked down at the broken pieces, then at her hand wrapped in the handkerchief, then at George. She just leaned over and hugged him, letting go of all the hurt from the day. Her shoulders shook as she cried. George held her tight. When she quieted down, she whispered, "Thank you for coming, for staying." He kissed the top of her head. "I'm not going anywhere." "I'm sorry if I made trouble," she said, pulling back a little. "You didn't make trouble," he said, looking her in the eye. "You were in trouble, and you stood your ground." She tried to smile. I know I'm not your real you are, he said, cutting her off. Don't ever finish that sentence. You are my daughter in every way that matters. A real smile broke through her tears. He pulled her back in. To me, he whispered, you've always been that little girl I held the first time your mom let me try. The one who used to run out to meet me when I got home from the studio. The one who stared down the neighbor's big dog when you were 5. She laughed through her tears. I remember that. You looked him right in the eyes. George laughed. The dog walked away like he was scared. She laughed again, wiping her face. You're strong, Maira, George said. Serious again. Not because you fight, but because you know why you fight. And you don't back down when you know you're right. She nodded. The plane started to move. Keep the pieces, he said, looking at the bundle in her lap. It's okay if it's broken. Sometimes broken things remind us what's important. She didn't say anything. She just reached over and held his hand, and this time she didn't let go. And that's the story of Maira Clooney, the girl who is more than just a name. It's a story that hit me hard. It's about being treated with respect, about being young and judged, and about having someone stand up for you with quiet, strong love. George Clooney didn't show up like a big star. He showed up as a father. That's the kind of love the world needs. And Maira, she didn't just get through that day. She stood up for herself and walked away with her own strength. If this story touched you, I'd love to know what you think. Leave a comment below. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more stories that come from the heart. Until next time, be kind, stand tall, and remember that even broken things have meaning, just like Maira's cup.